Okay, so we were saying that we had these couple of panels talking about investment, and the next one is going to be pretty much about it, because this is about company creation from an investor's perspective. So this is about science, engineering, and venture capital, and that's why today we'll have on this stage Eli Bou from Apple Media Knowledge, Montse Vendrell, Aliath, and Frank Bulens from IMEC Xpand. And it's going to be chaired by Josep Lluis Sanfeliu from ASABYS. So whenever you want, stage is yours.
Jo allà, segona, no?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tech Barcelona for allowing us to share some of the views around science, engineering, company creation. The title of the session is from an investor perspective, and you can see that in this roundtable we have some investors, which we will introduce in a minute, and also an entrepreneur in science and engineering. And myself, I'm Josep Sanfeliu. I'm an investor in mostly health tech and biotech at ASABYS Partners, a venture capital firm that was created 5-6 years ago. We manage 300 million euros in 2 funds today. We founded the firm with Clara, who comes from precisely the science and the pharma industry, and myself with some years of trajectory as a VC. So we've been confronting most of the topics that we will be addressed today. So I have the opportunity and honor to share the table today with my colleagues who will be introduced in a second. To start, I just wanted to share some of the data, which is in a way not very good data to start, because we are far behind compared to other ecosystems. One of the statistics that we could look at when we try to address this question is how many companies, or what percentage of the technology, healthcare, biotech, engineering, tech, companies that come out in the market, some of you guys might be considering or already started, how many of those actually are spin-offs, spin-outs, or basically started at university or have a very strong ties to university, right? Because it's a source of precisely innovation. The previous panel about deep tech was precisely sharing the potential that we have still in places like Catalonia, Spain, Europe, in a way, right? But if you look at the statistics and you look at some of the data available of what percentage of those companies come out from universities and what's the potential of the universities throughout Europe and research centers, you find that the statistics talk about 15% of those, according to statistics, different sources. It's not a clear number, but it's around 15% in Germany, 12% in the UK, 18% in Switzerland, and Spain is below 10%. So, and if we do that at Catalonia, probably it's going to be around that number. No? Obviously, if you try to do that math in the US, numbers go beyond 30%. The only other thing that you can face when you look at the numbers is that it's very difficult to do this number in a way, because in Europe we have, or tend to have, and I will obviously like to hear what the panel says, but we have this dichotomy between a company and the university. It's like we have to spin out. And in the US it's probably regarded more. We are investors in a company in Boston and in Tel Aviv, and my experience tells me that in some other geographies there's no such differentiation. The collaboration is very strong. There's licensing, you know, how much money Stanford is getting from royalties from technologies that are licensed out. Here you license out something from a university and it looks like sometimes you are a pervert that's taking public money from universities into the private sector. We have to battle that. But I'm not going to talk anymore. I just wanted to introduce the topic, and I will let my colleagues through several questions to share their views, which is, I'm sure, very interesting. So we will start with a brief introduction of each of them. So please, Eli, if you want to start introducing yourself to the audience so we can start chatting.
Sure. So I did study electronics engineering and telecom engineering at the university, and I've been always very, very close with the university here in Barcelona, UPC. I also ended up like doing my PhD here, and I thought that my entire life would actually be building like a research team and working from the university. Actually, like the life had something different for me planned, and so I ended up like founding my own startup, Vilynx. Basically, we worked on AI to structure the world's information, and we got acquired by Apple 4 years ago. And basically, I've been at Apple leading media knowledge since then.
Thank you. Montse?
Hi, my name is Montse Vendrell. I'm a partner at a venture capital fund investing in life sciences, Aliath Bioventures. I have a background in science. I'm a biologist, trained here, basic research too, like Eli was saying, postdoc in US, you know, like the usual path, came back, another postdoc. But at some point, and I'm talking about a few more years ago than in Eli's case, when the ecosystem here was, I would say, basically a desert, there was an initiative starting, which was the Barcelona Science Park, but there was only a hole on the ground at that point. So I started moving down the value chain, and I was part of the team that started the park, the incubator, and I ended up being the CEO of the park. We started BioCat then, which is a cluster organization promoting biotech in our ecosystem and community. And from there on, I moved on to becoming a VC, to the dark side. So I hope I can give a little bit of perspective of different points in the ecosystem and the need to have the right ingredients.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, hi everybody, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel, interesting panel. So my name is Frank Bulens. I have an academic background. I'm a molecular biologist, did my PhD and a postdoc biomedical sciences at the Faculty of Medicine in Leuven in Belgium. But then very fast after that, also made the decision to go to the dark side, as Montse mentioned, described it. I'm now on the VC side for 25 years, or even maybe even a little bit longer. You see, I lost a lot of hair since I went to the dark side. But I can tell you my hair is really drying very fast. But anyway, that's an advantage. But I think, let's say that, and let me say first where I'm now. So I'm now a partner with IMEC Xpand. And IMEC Xpand is investing in startups that are developing hardware technology. And we do that in collaboration with the IMEC Research Institute. So we do early stage, even pre-seed funding. And we try to build those companies going forward by bringing them the right ingredients to be as successful as possible.
Good, thank you. So we will start with a little bit of jumping into the opinions. We have an international view on the topics I started mentioning. So Frank, let's start from your side. I'm going back here. What is your view? You at IMEC Xpand, I'm sure you're connected to Leuven, to universities throughout Europe, and you're interacting, and you are investing in teams, in academic research teams. You also license technologies from industry, from academia. What is your view on how Belgium or Europe, and now that you are an investor also in Barcelona, do you see differences there? What's your view on creating companies in collaboration or from the academia?
Well, I think whether I see differences, if I look at what we do currently with IMEC, I think it's often comes down to the same, very often to the same topic, that you have an academic team that goes out of that, let's say, lab in the academic setting, and then needs to transform itself to a business savvy or oriented R&D team, and that comes certainly often with the same challenges. That is, you have that founding tech team, that used to work together, that know each other very well, but often, and that's definitely the case if we are looking at the spin-off coming out of IMEC, have very little real business feeling. And so the main challenge, I think, for a spin-off that comes out of an academic setting is to embrace other people, other executive team members coming in that bring what they lack, which is often, let's say, to manage what they are developing in terms of technology, to bring that to the market. So product development, regulatory, those market access, those type of topics. And to embrace that to the full extent can sometimes be a challenge.
Good. Montse, what do you think with regard to technology, science, universities? What has changed in the last 20 years? We've been a long time in the ecosystem in science, even before Tech Barcelona was founded. So, she was very young. We were all teenagers at the time. We still are. But I mean, it was a long time, and you've seen the evolution of the ecosystem. Has something changed? University, research?
Everything has changed. I mean, we need to bear in mind research centers, ICREA program, supercomputer, CINAC, the National Genomic Center. I'm talking about life science, which is what I know well. Barcelona Science Park. They were not there at the turn of the century. So, I mean, we had the universities which do good science, but in a system that doesn't really incentivize the excellence, the capacity to start up. So first of all, we are a young community. 25 years, that's nothing if you compare ourselves to other areas. Also, we are very siloed in between disciplines, for instance, when you study. In between public and private, that is a very demonized space, access to public health data, for instance. So all of that, which has always been kind of a taboo, has made the system very rigid and very difficult for a scientist to start a company, for an investor then to obviously invest in companies spinning out from a research center or university who approves that. Everything takes too long. So that's a little bit the whole kind of like ingredient, but we have certainly changed a lot throughout these 20 years. We're not there yet. We could be much more efficient, but we're starting to see the outcome of that. If I take as an example from our portfolio, I would say like 60% comes from research centers that were not there 25 years ago, or ICREA professors, right? So that's already a step forward. And we are talking that we have international investors investing in some of these startups that initially come from these research centers. So we're certainly moving forward. There's a lot of things that certainly could improve. But yeah, I think we are now, and we can discuss this later, at an inflection point of where science has matured. We start to see really good startups. How do we scale this up, and what do we need from here on?
Good. So this is a perspective of investors that have been in academia, dark side they call it. But now let's go to the bright side, which is. But tell us about your experience. You were for 7 years working on your PhD after graduating from Politècnica de Catalunya. You were doing AI before anybody in this room were aware that AI was there already for many years. And you decided to start a company that you financed with venture capitalists and then did the whole cycle and sold the company to Apple in the area of AI. So how was the start, and how was the day that you and your colleagues decided to start the company and your relationship with the research around you?
It's a very good question. So basically, we're also talking a few years ago, so things have changed a lot. But back in the day, when I was doing my PhD, I had a co-advised PhD between MIT in Boston and UBC here in Spain. And so I remember very clearly like talking to the expats that we were all there thinking like, oh, now we've got access to this. We are really in the like the expertise of the field, etc. And now to keep working on such projects there were not many things that you could do, particularly in deep tech and AI back then. The ecosystem here wasn't that much mature. And so what happened is I remember clearly thinking, like, now I only have two options, which is to stay in Boston or to move to California, but that's basically it. And I was very homesick. I wanted to come back. And I also knew that while I had been studying, at the beginning I had a lot of complex, like assuming that coming from UPC and going to one of these like Ivy League universities, I'd be missing a lot of the context and the data, and I would be like a bit of an outlier. But when I joined these teams, I didn't feel less on them. I was like, well, actually, the education that I've received home, it's pretty cool. I'm good here. And so to me, like this was kind of like the proof I needed to really see that we had nothing to envy to the students that were going in these universities. And so there was a big pool of talent also in Spain, particularly around AI, waiting just to be picked by startups. And so at that point, when I met Juan Carlos Ribeiro, who was a co-founder of my startup with me, of Vilynx, basically, we both held hands, and he moved to California, and I moved to Barcelona. He ran market and sales from Palo Alto, and I came here to build the engineering team from Barcelona, because I was very confident about the talent that we have here and the big opportunity it was. And so we decided to do it that way. It worked really well. I don't think I would have been able to do that unless I had met JC, who had done that first and had this experience. So I think there is a lot of things that happen because there's these synergies between successful entrepreneurs coming back and teaching and helping the next generations to also pick up that. The ecosystem wasn't that ready a few years ago, but today is way better. And I think particularly around AI, now things have changed a lot. Now there are like a lot of big companies creating AI hubs in Barcelona, and that really helps the ecosystem because around AI at least, sometimes you need to access to some computational power, some data that you cannot just do in the universities. So having research centers and having big hubs of these companies located here really helps build synergies and create the experience we need in this talent to move to the entrepreneurial kind of side of things.
On those years when you started, it's well known that typically companies, when they start, they need typically two things. Talent, obviously a team, but they need money, they need space. How relevant is specialized infrastructure? Tech Barcelona has its infrastructure with buildings that helps startups join together. Some universities don't have that room or that space, and in the case of Montse, she was running the Science Park of Barcelona, but how relevant would be, in your views, the access to specialized space? I'm saying this because in the area of healthcare, there's a bunch of infrastructure projects now being built in Barcelona, different science parks, private and public. So it looks like it's important. I don't know how much, because in this, in this world where we can connect through Teams and Zoom and everything, it looks like there's still a need for space. And you were telling me that when you started, you were using office space from the university, but how important is, with regard to company creation, space, and how important is specialized financing? Because for the full friends and family and seed funding, you can talk to your neighbor and you might lure him into your company. But then when it gets tough, when you have to talk to specialized guys, how important is to have specialized or available space close to your spin-off? And how important is the specialized investors?
So a specialized space was super important, particularly because of the silos you were mentioning. So what happened is that students would graduate and they decide to go to the industry without even thinking about being part of a startup. So we had to kind of catch them in between this jump. And so for us, basically, we ended up like renting office space inside the university and putting basically everything we could there and doing all sorts of ways to attract talent and being compatible like with PhDs inside the company, master thesis inside the company, anything we could do to bring researchers and students to work for us, so we could use that as a way to lure them into our startup and not lose them to consultancy firms and some of these companies. So this was critical for us, definitely. We kept growing inside the university until at one point they were like, we don't have more room for you, you should just go find your own space. And they basically kicked us, but it worked really, really well for us. In terms of funding and specialized funding, I'm going to talk about what I know, which is deep tech. You need a specialized kind of funding for deep tech because your investors cannot be expecting returns in 1 year or 1 year and a half. Like, for instance, in Vilynx, we spent 3 years and a half just building a technology demonstrator. So try telling your neighbor, like, hey, well, I'm still building something for 3 years and a half and having him keep like patiently seated and totally fine by it. So yes, like I think you also need a specialized funding for some of these projects and people that really understand the intricacies of what you're trying to build and are resilient enough to be like, okay, so I'm accompanying you through the journey and I know this journey is going to take some time.
Montse?
Well, obviously, space is extremely crucial, and particularly in the life sciences space. And as you've mentioned, we've seen the evolution when initially was the science park. It was hard to imagine how we would fill that up. Now it's completely full, and now the market takes over. And there's private initiatives covering that space because there's certainly a need. If you want to do company building, you want to invest in a company or a project that comes from a research center, it cannot remain in the same lab, regulatory-wise, for 100 reasons why. And there's also this, what Eli was saying, the need to become a community, to interact, also of branding, like, you know, for instance, this initiative of Tech Barcelona that we're here, right? Before the peers existed, the whole tech community was completely spread out. And now it has not only visibilized the tech as a sector, startups, it has positioned Barcelona, it's attracting investments, it's fostering interaction. So space goes beyond space, but it acts really as a cohesive ingredient. And qualified investors, it's not just money, it's what it's called, smart money, right? So it's good that friends, fools, and family cover that initial gap, but one needs to be careful of decisions that might really jeopardize access to financing down the road, like excessive valuations or weird cap tables. So the sooner a company can attract qualified investors that know and can really guide the company from day one through the board, and obviously putting the capital that's needed there, that's crucial. And that's something that has also changed a lot. And you know, we're attracting a lot of international investors to our communities, and it's something that keeps growing and growing.
And Frank, more on the specialized investor side, I would like to, the audience probably is interested in also knowing an additional layer that you have, which is not only specialized, but you can also connect your investments to the parent, let's say, engineering company. How hard is that with regard to, you are different entities, but you are very close to the engineering world and you can create collaborations. How do you manage that? And how important is that for the ecosystem Leuven in Belgium, right? Because sometimes in Spain, in Barcelona, we don't see some of the tractor industries, you know, the engineering companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the tech companies, the incumbents, the big ones, right? Contributing that much to the startup ecosystem. That's very relevant for, according to statistics and other ecosystems. How are you guys with regard to this point?
Yeah, I would first like to go back, well, let's say, yeah, like 20 years ago when in Belgium I was at Gimvet at a point in time doing investments, early stage companies in the biotech field. At that time, in Europe, biotech was almost non-existing. So we, with a small team, on the investor side, we started to invest in spin-offs coming out of local research institutes. And indeed, at that time, it was initially it was a struggle to find facilities to put those spin-offs. But over the years, then it's indeed an ecosystem that develops around, let's say, a cluster of successful startups that have been attracting sufficient capital to really make it to an exit and build a critical mass, which is like, yeah, the grounding or the ground floor for a new ecosystem. So we have seen that to take place in the biotech field. If I now look at the deep tech field, the challenge there is significantly greater, to the extent that in terms of facilities, in terms of developing deep tech type of startups, yeah, you need often more capital. And I think, let's say, the basis for setting up spin-offs, so the quality of the research, I think, is certainly there in Europe, whether it's Flanders or Belgium, or whether it's Catalonia, Spain, any other, or most other countries in Europe as well. But the challenge is indeed to translate that in a successful startup. And I think for a dedicated team, they will find the space to do it, to set up their company. But I think where we are currently, and maybe I'm drifting a bit off your initial question, but it's a point I really would like to make, is that where we are really lacking currently in that space is, let's say, not on the seed stage. I think it's reasonably feasible to find seed funding, but to find funding to get to a Series A, Series B, so there is a gap. Many investors are currently focusing on let's say, more later stage opportunities, which means that companies that got started, got seed funding, are kind of in a gap. And so that's making it obviously difficult to get that initial technology that has been developed in an academic setting to translate that into a product. That funding cap, I think, is there. Certainly, I would say in Belgium, but you see that, yeah, Europe-wide, that there is a drop, a significant. If we look back to the years, the Corona years, where there was a sharp increase in health tech investments all over Europe, also in the US, of course. I think that in the US has more, let's say, not really stalled. In Europe, we are now in a situation where, yeah, the pace of making investments in startups has gone down, and maybe, yeah, carefully tries to recover, but it's still hard for, let's say, startups to get the funding to translate their technology into a product.
Yeah, good. So we are close to the end, so I would like to ask you to share with the audience a key message with regard to if there's someone in the audience about to start a company, or started 3 months ago, or started 3 years ago, and they're doing deep tech, they're doing science, they're doing technology, and they're dealing with universities, or they're dealing with company creation challenges. What type of couple of tips you could share? Whoever wants to start, if you need time, but I think you have a lot of experience. I'm sure you can come up with some ideas.
Talk to a lot of people, talk around, check your proposal, or put yourself in front of different investors. Most of us, even though we're not maybe investing at that time, or it doesn't really match our sweet spot. We listen to entrepreneurs, we give good advice. So be passionate, but don't be stubborn. So put your proposal in front of a lot of investors, people who know about the business, other CEOs, and keep on pivoting until you really see that you respond to a real need and that there's a business model that supports that.
I'd say surround yourself with people that have done it before and that have different experience levels, because there is going to be a lot of challenges in your road. And so I think having someone that you can ask for advice when this happens, it's crucial. When we're talking about rounds and dilutions and valuations and all that stuff, it's great to have someone that can really help you a bit across those things.
Frank?
Yeah, I think before you start, I would say take a deep breath, because it will be a long run in most cases. And I think it's also about timing. If the things that you can work out before incepting or funding your company, do it before, because starting prematurely with a startup is not good, because then the road that you have ahead is way too long, and that road is going to be a kind of an off-road. It will not be a straight line, but you will have to go kind of off-road. But I think a key point is to be open to bring in the additional talent that Eli is also referring to, the additional talent into the team, but also in the board. People that indeed have done it before, that can give advice on the strategy and so forth, and be open, listen to the people that have done it before, and that can give good advice. And also look for the right investors. I think with IMEC Xpand, and it's not easy, but for the spin-offs that we do in Belgium, well, in Flanders, for the seed round, we try to build already at that point in time an international syndicate. So to try to identify investors, and of course, I hear people already thinking, well, if you're living in Belgium, that's probably not difficult. Yeah, indeed, Belgium is a small country, so it's another, let's say, reason to look outside. But it helps to build a network. The network to investors, to build that forward is very important.
Well, thank you very much. We are running out of time. It's been a pleasure to moderate and an honor to have Eli, Montse, and Frank on this panel, and hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.